What is up, homies? Welcome back to the first episode of the Heroes Reforged podcast. This episode, we're going to be talking about Superman and the DC universe, particularly the state of the DC universe, whether or not we're confident about it, how we feel about it. But Hector, I know you really, really wanted to get into Superman.
Yes. I mean, this was Hector's big idea.
Yeah,
and whenever Hector has a big idea, it's always worked out well for us. So we need to follow follow our noses.
We watched a trailer when it came out a few weeks ago, and we had yet to relaunch our discussion space, the podcast. And now we do it. And now it's here in person. And now we have a studio. And I want to continue having that conversation because there's an entire generation of youngins who are watching us on YouTube or wherever right now, listening to our podcast, who were not even born in 2013. Do you know what I'm saying? Who are not even alive. Well, maybe that's accurate. Maybe not.
I don't know if I want to throw
The point is,
hold on.
The point is,
let's not age ourselves
every
again.
episode so far, we've talked about how old we are.
This is how old we are. We have gray pubes on our nuts, and there's young kids watching right now like, I don't know what a Superman is, so we have to educate. We have to share. Well, basically this. I wanted to start the conversation by going around and talking about, for each of us, how and why we care about this character, how we met the character, and why we care about them. Because the thing about characters like this that have been around forever, even characters that have been around since the 90s. Gentlemen, yes, I made a joke. We're joking, but we are old. Yeah. And if I have conversations online,
I don't need to be reminded every 5 seconds.
Fair.
You put an old count.
So old. But like, I'll have a conversation with somebody will be in the YouTube comments of some of our videos, whatever, and I'll have to remind myself, like, they don't have the same frame of reference that I do.
Right.
They didn't watch the same cartoon shows that I did. They didn't read the same comic books that I did. They didn't watch the same CW shows starring Tom Welling that I did. So when they talk about Superman, they're kind of talking about a different thing than I am. So it's about like...
But the same at the same time.
Yes,
right?
It is. Yeah. Which is what's great about characters like this. But it is also like, there's so much to talk about. And I think that ourselves included, but especially everybody on the internet, you have to have that patience when you join the conversation and you meet somebody, whether it's about Superman or a Star Wars thing or whatever. Like, everybody has their own ideas of what these things are, and everybody has their own personal relationship to what these things are. And Adam is the #1 Superman fan, I think, that we know. So let's start with you, Adam. Adam, where did you get into this character?
I do want to preface this by saying that we will be referring to James Gunn as Jaime Pistolas from now on. So, Jaime Pistolas, if you're watching, this episode's for you.
Oh my God, amazing. And also, before we get into it, I also want to remind people who are watching on YouTube, make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe to the videos. If you're enjoying the podcast, the reception to the first episode has been really, really good. Everyone has been really complimentary to the entire thing. So thank you guys so much. Check out our Patreon. Of course, we've always got uncut reactions to something that we're watching, plenty of movies and shows. And for all you audio people, listen carefully. You guys need to go into the comments and tell us and everyone in the world how much you love our show.
Give us 5 stars. 5 stars and nothing less.
Yeah.
5 stars.
Otherwise, we'll send Augustine and his dog.
Right,
for
baby.
You.
Both my dogs. You don't even know how tough.
Them.
You don't know how tough Donut is.
I know. That's why she's called Donut. She's a tough little cookie. But in regards to Superman, you want to know about our relationships to the character.
Yeah, you start.
Okay. Well, my relationship with the character, truthfully, I don't know exactly how I was first introduced. Like, I can't tell you the first time I saw the character and where it was.
Also, we're all about to cry, so just be prepared for that. It's not a big deal.
But my earliest recollection of my relationship with the character was we had a recorded copy of Superman 2 on VHS. I think it was from KCOP.
Okay.
It played in like the 90s or something. So that was my first introduction to the character, was just watching that movie on repeat. And then I think because my family and I, they used to like to go to the mall, naturally, I gravitated towards things that looked appealing to me. And I must have seen Superman on a comic book stand or a magazine stand and immediately beeline for that.
Yeah.
Because from there on, I started every birthday and every Christmas, I would get comic books from Superman, the greatest Superman stories ever told. I still have it to this day. I've had it now for 34 years. And
that's for people that don't know what that is specifically, that's a little compilation paperback book that they made.
I remember it being big. My version was big.
It was
a thick boy.
for a 6-year-old
Also,
too.
yes, we were little.
Yeah.
You give a 6-year-old 150 pages, they're like, this is
impossible to read.
This is War and Peace.
I'm going to be 30 when I finish
Yeah.
this.
If you pick it up now, you might go, oh, okay, there's like 6 stories in here or whatever it is. But it was a reprinting, obviously, very important Superman comic books.
Yes.
So that's a good kind of an entry level.
It was amazing. And then because of Nick and Knight, I was exposed to the George Reeves Superman show. And I think all of those things happening at the same time really made me fall in love and understand. And I don't think I thought about this and knew this at the time, the different iterations of the character and how he could be different.
Yeah.
But also generally speaking, whether it's comic books, the movies at the time, and that TV show, Superman was always the best possible version of what a person can be.
Yeah.
He was always incredibly kind. He was always incredibly heroic, brave. And yes, he had all of these amazing superpowers. But at the end of the day, I feel like that character, whether or not he had the powers, he would be good no matter what, based on what his parents instilled in him and the values that he grew up with. And I feel like
and you clocked all of this even before Smallville came out.
Even before Smallville,
So
absolutely.
Smallville just sort of reinforced your idea of the character, because Smallville was kind of like a groundbreaking television show that impacted our entire generation.
Yeah.
It impacted James Gunn. He's like, I still think that the Michael Rosenbaum,
Jaime Pistolas.
There you go.
He's like, I still consider the Rosenbaum version of Lex Luthor like the definitive Lex Luthor. But that show basically is saying what you're saying, Adam, where it's like, no. People might think they know what Superman is, but really it's about how these two parents raised a guy named Clark Kent to be like a good dude.
Absolutely.
So that's cool.
Yeah, and I mean, through the 90s, we also had Lois and Clark, The New Adventures with Superman, or of Superman, and then we had Superman, the animated series.
Yes.
So even before Smallville, I think the reason why maybe you and I, our generation, connected with it, well, you're only a couple years older than us, but I think the reason why...
Adam, that was mean.
I know.
That was so mean.
Well,
Jesus
I'm adding that context.
Adam was saying it, I was like, I can't believe he's saying this.
Guys, I'm just going to dust
crazy.
away like Thanos came in the room.
I'm adding the context because when Clark Kent started high school, I started high school.
I see.
So our high school...
That is true, that even though we're all the same age right now,
Yeah.
When we talk about, what year do we graduate high school? It's like, even a couple of years difference, it's like, vastly different.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
If you graduate in 04 versus 05 and 06,
different.
It's really big differences in like who you are as a person, what you believe in, all that sort of stuff. So, so Superman for me has always been a staple in my life. And we talked about it. We joked about in the last episode how I would ping pong back and forth sometimes between Superman and Batman. Those were always my top two guys. I always loved those two characters.
And that's impressive too, because growing up in the 90s,
it's all about Batman.
Yes.
Oh my God. That was the era of Batman.
Batman had movies coming out.
Yeah.
You know, the Superman movies
92,
had ended.
95, 97. Yeah.
Yes. And it was
you still love those movies.
Oh my God. Are you kidding me?
Chill. Yeah. They're okay. They're fine.
Nipples
They're fine.
all day long.
Nipples.
Come on, get out of here.
Okay. So I have a similar, because we all sort of came up around the same time. My thing with Superman is I feel as though I got the early exposure with things like reruns of the Super Friends.
Challenge of the Super
Challenge of the
Friends.
Super Friends. He was, Superman, like, was always a big, which, and so and also just like kind of reading comic books a little bit. Here's the other thing we have to mention, which was a seismic thing that happened in comic books in the 90s. In 1993, Superman dies.
Dude.
I think we were maybe a little too young to, like, I wasn't like a regular comic book reader when that happened, but I definitely read those comics like a little bit after that. And a little bit after Superman had returned, and they had introduced characters like Steel and all that stuff. But
I was on those comics when they came out.
And here's the other thing.
I was at Costco when I picked that up.
Absolutely.
Like, I remember seeing the 2-pack.
They sold
Death of Superman and the greatest Superman stories ever told, 2-pack in one.
Wow.
At Costco.
That's why I fell in love with Costco.
At
We're going to
Price
have
Club?
a Costco episode one of these
Kirkland.
Damn, come on, Kirkland King.
No, not today.
not
Today I'm
today.
wearing my nacho.
There we go. But so like Superman was also big in comics.
Yeah.
And he was sort of like, it's just interesting to remember, like, he didn't have movies coming out during the 90s the way that Batman did, and went from Michael Keaton to Val Kilmer to George Clooney.
Right.
But Superman still had, like you said, that Superman and Lois live action TV show on TV. And the comic books were like some of the biggest comics of the decade.
Yeah.
And so
Stas.
I was vaguely aware of that stuff, but it wasn't until Superman the Animated Series that I went, oh, okay, I know that this character is the first superhero. I know that he's friends with Batman, Wonder Woman, the rest of the Justice League because of Super Friends.
Right.
And anytime I would get a like a Justice League comic book, Superman was there. But it wasn't until Superman, the animated series, that I was sort of like, I think I know this character's history. I've read a little bit about it. This is also pre-internet because, again, we're old. But it was STAS, Superman, the animated series, that like I still remember the first 3 episodes was sort of a mini movie.
It was.
And it blew my mind because the entire first 20 minutes, the entire first part was on Krypton. And it was Jor-El. And it was,
Dude,
and then they
don't even get me started because in my brain, I'm like, that's such a great trilogy of films.
Yes, and they looped in, which was unique to this cartoon show, which I didn't know until later. I thought it was like always the way. Brainiac was involved on Krypton.
Yes.
Brainiac was the reason that Krypton exploded. And so as a kid, I was like, oh, this makes perfect sense. That cartoon made me fall in love, and I just want to get to this one moment in part 3. By the time he gets to, it may have even been part 2, and maybe you know the specific moment. A couple of years ago, when I interviewed some of the actors from the TV show Krypton, you remember that show?
With Cameron Cuff?
With Cameron Cuff. Cameron Cuff is also a very dashing young British guy, tall,
really
handsome
nice
guy, super nerd. And when I was talking about Superman, the animated series, he knew this moment before it escaped my lips because it hit him as well. It's when Superman first shows up in Metropolis because a plane is crashing and he's trying to save the plane.
Dude, Superman saving a plane is always S tier.
It's S tier, but he whiffs it and he misses it. He's hovering there in the air and he says to himself, "Nice one, Clark." And then he goes and saves the plane. And I was like, oh, he's Clark. He's Clark all the time.
Yeah.
And then, of course, a couple years later, Smallville was happening. I'm like, yes, he's Clark all the time. This idea that like, and again, I do love that Kill Bill moment, but Bill is wrong. That's why the bride kills him. He's wrong when he talks about how like Clark Kent is Superman's critique of humanity. That's not true. Clark is human. He's just
a representation.
He's just a strong boy.
Yes.
But he's a dude. He's a human kid raised in this world. He is adopted, but his name is Clark. It's when he learns his sort of like birth name, Kal-El. That's his culture, but that's not necessarily, you know, anyway.
That's his heritage.
That's my connection to the character. That version that went all the way through Superman, the animated series, Justice League Unlimited, voiced by Tim Daly and then George Newbern. That to me is my favorite. And then at the end when he takes on Darkseid and he's, the most badass of all the kids, like where they let him flex a little bit because, you know, up to
Living
that point.
in a world made of cardboard.
Iconic shit.
God damn.
So to step away from this convo with this is my relationship to the character, we mentioned it a little bit in episode 0. I also grew up with like, well, Spider-Man's my guy. I like this character. I like that character. We all grew up starting to really like the badass characters, Wolverine, Batman. Oh my God, those guys are tops. And then you start to go, the Superman's a dork. He's too dorky. He's too. Yeah. But then again, you get a little bit older.
He's got no issues.
Yeah, I never thought he was dorky.
Okay.
I never thought he was dorky.
He would, but you definitely go through a stage of like he's not cool.
Yeah.
So he's not my favorite.
Which is
okay.
I think part of it is also like we don't feel like he's challenged enough. But it's not until I got older
that you go,
that I go, oh no.
The best Superman stories, he's constantly challenged. He's constantly challenged because it's not about a physical thing.
Right.
You know, there's a reason his main arch nemesis is Lex Luthor, who is a normal human.
Billionaire.
But he's a billionaire. And we know how
turns out billionaire. Yeah.
Turns out billionaires can be pretty fucking dangerous.
Pretty shitty.
They can mess some shit up.
Yeah.
So
really?
Anyway, I bumped
That's
myself
not the podcast for that.
No. Not yet.
My relationship, similar to you guys. I was into Marvel Comics before I got into Superman, and so the moment I remember seeing Superman was the death of Superman, and I was like, "No, Superman can't die." I instantly picked up the double copy of The Death of Superman with the amazing, cover art on it, and the greatest stories ever told. The Death of Superman was great. It was an event. I was like, oh man, I feel like I missed a lot. I should read a lot before and I need to figure out what happens after.
Yeah.
But what stuck out to me from that collection was the story of, I forgot what it was, the man who had everything or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Where Mongol attaches that big brain sucking
written
thing.
by Alan Moore, the creator of Watchmen.
That was the first story where I read Superman and I was like, oh, this is incredible.
Dude,
like that story and
then Batman and Robin and Wonder Woman are trying to save
right,
him.
Yeah, exactly. And then they pull off the thing with Mongol's gloves, right? So
Wonder Woman has an amazing fight with Mongol.
Incredible.
Oh my
absolutely
God.
incredible. But to see what Superman was going through in his head, I was like
emotionally.
Oh my God, this is sad. It's tragic.
And you remember the Justice League cartoon that adapted that.
Yeah, exactly. They did a decent job, but the comic is still.
You know what's so funny is that out of every project that has ever adapted an Alan Moore written thing, a comic book.
Mm-hmm.
He hates them all. He thinks they're all awful.
Yeah.
But that Justice League cartoon, he's a fan of.
Which is a good one. That story is incredible.
It's great.
Yeah.
And from after that point, though, I felt like I took a gap in between. It was a gap like in my comic book knowledge as well. I started getting into high school, junior high, like all that stuff. So comics went to the wayside. Girls breakdancing and like hip hop became my thing.
And there's not new Superman movies coming out.
Exactly.
To keep him in
he
the
wasn't
pop
in. He wasn't in the zeitgeist, right?
And maybe Nicolas Cage will end up being him, and then all of those projects fell apart.
I didn't even pay attention to that. Like I was just out of it.
I watched E! News every day.
See, I was not watching any of that stuff. And so Superman just kind of fell out of it. And then later I missed Justice League and Justice League Unlimited as it was premiering on TV.
Oh, okay.
That's
so
right.
I binged it on my own. Jesus Christ. You couldn't convince me that there was any greater comic book property.
Yeah.
Until we saw everybody get dusted in the MCU,
right.
there was no greater comic book series in my life.
Yeah.
I was like, Justice League and Justice League Unlimited.
I mean, look at our logo.
Yeah.
It's a throwback to the Justice League Unlimited logo.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you could argue it's still the best. It's still the gold standard for like if you're adapting comic book universes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
It's amazing.
They're the MCU is following their blueprint.
Yeah.
You know? But also to be fair, that animated blueprint, let me piss off some DC fans for a second. IGN put out like a 40-minute documentary that I thought was great with some interviews with people that did the Justice League cartoon show, including Kevin Conroy before he passed away.
Oh, cool.
And you can watch this right now on IGN right now. Pause this, go pull that up, watch it. The whole thesis is like, when they made this cartoon show, the reason they made these characters so great, Hawk Girl, Green Lantern, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash, and Martian Manhunter, is because they were kind of following Marvel Comics methods of giving the characters a little bit more depth, a little bit more drama, as opposed to following more of the classic DC comic books, which were more simplistic. So Marvel begat DC, begat Marvel, they help each other.
That's how it's always
help each other.
Yeah, it's always been like that.
We're going through that right now with the films.
It's fine.
Exactly.
It's fine.
So that comes out. Super big fan of DC, the animated series.
Yeah.
And everything out there, I try to keep up with the animated movies that had come out, and they were fine. Animation style was always kind of a bit bland for me.
Yeah.
But recently, Superman and Lois has captured my heart again.
Oh, dude.
People
don't make me cry.
And every iteration of Superman up to this point in live action has been incredible.
Yeah.
Tyler Hoechlin, the CW version, just everything is the greatest version of Superman for me. Like it just doesn't get any better than Tyler Hoechlin's.
Talk about why. I mean, people can go watch our YouTube reactions, but talk about why specifically this take on Superman.
I fell in love with him because Clark is bad at barbecuing. He can't cook to save his life. The fact that I know that about him makes me fall in love with him even more. The fact that he had to pretend to carry a heavy ice chest at his kid's baseball game.
Yeah.
Like the stuff I love about Superman in that show, Tyler Hoechlin, isn't even about Superman. It's Clark stuff. It's about Clark adapting to being human and how good he is at it.
Yeah.
Like he can't call attention to himself. The fact that he is the bunt king in that one episode where he wanted to play baseball with his homies, and he was like, I can't play. And then he's like, I can bunt. And he became the bunt king. Yep. And then they won a game because of his championship bunting.
Yeah.
He's just so likable.
And Tyler Hoechlin is just likable. And the rest, and this is not a jab at the rest of the cast. The rest of the cast is incredible.
Great,
they all kill it. But that show is the best representation of Superman that I've ever seen. It has so much heart. It was so smart. All the characters are so well done. Except for Sophie.
Just for Sophie.
But yeah, we have a lot of stuff to talk about. So let's jump.
I'm glad you brought that up though, because one of the things I had in here was, what's your sort of favorite of all time, if you can name it?
Tyler Hoechlin
version of Superman. That's
easily
yours.
Tyler
And I inadvertently talked about mine. Mine's that DC animated universe, that version, and yours is, I don't know. Is it Christopher Reeve?
That's that's such a good question, because I saw this on the sheet and I was like, I don't know if I can answer this.
Yeah,
because I think there's elements of everything Superman related that I enjoy, some more than others. But if I had to pick,
producer Mark, Brandon Routh.
I like Brandon Routh as
you know
Superman.
What?
I think he gets too much flack. He gets too much flack.
He was great.
That movie, exactly. That movie didn't let him do it.
Yeah.
But when he came back for the CW show and he was in that really
he looked great. Yeah.
He looked awesome.
The last modernist Superman.
Interesting.
For the audio people, Mark said that's the last modernist Superman.
Yeah, he had a conversation that I want to dive into after Adam continues to just talk about Christopher Reeve. It's got to be.
Yeah, I mean, so
because of the heart.
I mean, yes, Christopher Reeve to me, and I think it's because he was the first Superman I was fully exposed to.
Yes.
You know, like the TV show I'd watch here and there, but those movies, those 4 films, I went to Blockbuster and rented them all the time. I was sick, Superman. I was sick again, Superman 2, Superman 4, whatever it was. But I think that the way that I was able to kind of connect with him on a personal level was through Smallville. You know, because I feel like a lot of the things that Clark would go through that were the non-powered things when it came to relationships with his parents, his family,
his crush,
with his crushes.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of myself through that.
We were that
because
same age,
because
dude.
I liked things that nobody that I knew of at the time liked. I liked superheroes. I liked Star Wars. I liked science fiction fantasy. Most of the guys that I was friends with were into football and soccer and, you know, baseball. Those things were not appealing to me. I was the guy who liked hockey, but nobody liked hockey, so I guess superheroes it was. So that's how I kind of found that personal, emotional connection to Clark,
he was an
Superman.
outsider.
He was an outsider.
Yeah.
But now, as a 37-year-old adult, the Tyler Hoechlin Superman, and I jokingly say this, but I kind of mean it, Superman and Lois feels like a spiritual sequel to Smallville in a lot of ways. Clark and Lois became Jonathan and Martha Kent.
Yeah.
And I think as we're getting older and we've had so much experience in our life and things have changed so much for us in the last even 10 years of us being friends and doing YouTube, even though he's a parent and I'm not, I still feel like I have an emotional connection that's even deeper now because of the context of that show.
Yeah.
So it is really hard for me to pick one. Those are the 3 specific eras.
Okay, you don't have to.
Of live action.
You specifically,
Superman.
you don't have to.
Yeah,
Hector
that
and I
really
do.
connected
You
with.
don't. You don't have to.
I liked how you mentioned that Superman and Lois show. Honestly, you don't have to do that much tweaking to be like, actually, this is going to be a sequel to Smallville, and we're bringing back Tom Welling and Erica Durant, and Rosenbaum's going to come back after he was Luthor in prison for 10 years or whatever. It would mostly be the same show. So without, of course, the talents of Tyler Hoechlin and Bitsy Tulloch or whatever.
Cudlitz,
it would be Tom Welling. He's a little bit more stoic, but hunky guy. Mark, what's your favorite Superman? Go. Smallville. There we go. See? Yeah.
I don't think they can hear him though. You got to repeat what he says.
Smallville. He says Smallville. He's Smallville. Smallville's his favorite. But he had a conversation. Can you pull up that whiteboard again if you didn't erase it already? Okay. He wants us to talk about go into modernist Superman versus the Snyder's postmodern Superman.
Oh man, are we gonna poke that beehive again?
Hey,
are we gonna?
Do you have any armor in the studio for us to wear?
Mark doesn't have the history on us, but the Snyderverse has
we've been
come for us hard. Yeah, he just threw a grenade.
Look, we can talk about this and basically I want to say 2 things. Number 1. If somebody's just kind of coming into our show or whatever, that stuff is still on YouTube. You can go back.
No, it's not.
No, they deleted it. The other
Superhero
channels
News no longer exists.
Well, that sucks because I was proud of our first time we watched
our hour-long
80-minute
Batman
review
versus
of Batman versus
Superman, you know, and
Superman.
we really talked through it, and we talked through about like what about this story kind of let us down a little bit.
Here's what's
us
impressive, and here's how you know the conversation's good.
Yeah,
it was 80 minutes.
Yeah,
and that video had well over 1 million views.
1.1 million views.
Yeah.
Hey,
that's how good our review was.
But okay, so that's the one thing I wanted to say, but now you can't watch it. Sorry. The second thing is that's out of our hands. That was another company, and apologies. But the second thing I want to say is something sort of you guys were bringing up when we were discussing Superman, and when you were bringing up with Superman and Lois, is that like those stories, the ones we connected to, felt like they were character first versus really trying to step back and do the sort of like deconstruction, postmodernist, you know, how can we say something new about Superman? It's a worthwhile endeavor. I'm not mad at it. I'm not saying that like artists shouldn't try to tackle that. But I think that it's really tough when you want to see creative people take on like iconic characters and do something new and cool. To me, that's different than, but this movie studio that owns the rights to these characters, in my mind, you know, they want to make money off of these characters, but they should also be looking at like, how are you going to build up this brand? How are you going to authentically sort of adapt what works for decades in these comic book characters and really bring that love and that whatever it is, that the success of that to the big screen. And I'll say this, like somebody just shared with me a rarely seen like Bible story Bible for Batman comics that legendary writer, he passed away a little bit ago, Denny O'Neil, wrote when he was writing Batman comics. This is sort of after the Adam West era of Batman, where it was very corny. The comic books were getting darker. The sort of Neil Adams, Denny O'Neil era. And so Dennis O'Neil, he wrote like, here's what needs to be in every sort of Batman story, that kind of Bible breakdown.
Wow.
And this person who shared it was somebody who like worked for Denny O'Neil in the 90s. So they were like photocopying this, and he still had it on a drive somewhere. And he shared it because Denny O'Neil years later was like, hey, do you still have that digitally? And he shared it to him. But this guy shared it on the internet on a blog post and was like, it's crazy to read through this and see how much of this still applies to Batman.
Yeah.
Meaning, right? What are the rules of this character?
Right.
These are the relationships he has. This is his sort of point of view of the world. You know, this is how far you can kind of bend the rules before you break them. Like all that stuff. That stuff matters and it's important, at least in my mind, when you start. If you want to get a little freaky deaky, right?
Exactly.
And go crazy as soon as you establish, hey, there's a long running superhero franchise of this character, and we've done, for example, Iron Man. Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man to me is like a pitch perfect adaptation of all of the good stuff in Iron Man comics.
Mm-hmm.
Some people might disagree. Some people will be like, no, he's too snarky, he's too jokey. Tony Stark isn't like that. Well, it depends on what Tony Stark comics you read. Mm-hmm. But in my mind, it's like that's Tony Stark before it's Jon Favreau's Iron Man, right? That's just the comic book character before it's Shane Black's Iron Man.
Yeah.
Those guys they're putting their stamp on it, but it's still like they are taking the responsibility of like, we want to put Marvel up on the screen. They're not doing sort of what Warner Brothers has been doing the past couple of years, where they're like, here's Todd Phillips' Joker. It's its own freaky deaky, artistic. Yeah. We're pushing the boundaries. And I'm like, that's cool. But what is that going to do for audiences? Are they going to think that is what the Joker character is? Mm-hmm. When other people, myself included, other fans, an established fan base, might have an entirely different idea of what that character is. And I think that's what ended up happening with this version of Superman. They were focusing more on what do we have to say about the character, when it's like, dude, there hasn't been, not counting the Brandon Routh, which also kind of didn't hit.
Right.
It didn't have enough of a
bite.
It's
also a sequel to the previous franchise,
mm-hmm. which the previous franchise is over. So I'm also not surprised that people didn't flock to this in 2006 and go, yes, finally, the Richard Donner version of Superman is back. It's like, that was from that generation. Mm-hmm. And instead of trying to do the 2006 Superman, they did the 1977 Superman again. Mm-hmm. So when you get to 2013, when you get to Man of Steel and beyond, it's creatives who, again, however you feel about it, should have been allowed to finish their movie, should not have been fired. That was Warner Brothers hiring them. Okay, you hired them. You got to let them do their job. That's what you hired them for. But it's what you said. You fell in love with Clark Kent.
Whoa.
No, it's what you said. It's what you said about Superman and Lois. Uh-huh. You're like, all the stuff I love has nothing to do with the Superman part.
Yeah.
You're like, it's Clark.
Part, yeah.
And when you watch Man of Steel, it's very somber. It's sometimes very imagery. The imagery is so beautiful. And you're like, wow, this is like, it must be really hard to be Superman. And it is. But you never go like, dude, I like this Clark guy. Mm-hmm. This guy, he's funny. He's warm. We know where his heart is.
I want to be his friend.
Yeah. It's never that. It's always like,
I'll go to his shitty barbecue.
Yeah, I'll eat his crappy food all day long.
The burden that this guy has. He goes into the church and he's like, I don't know if I should turn myself in. And you're like, okay, this is the movie we're watching. It's not like fun and it's not inspiring in some ways. But again, to a lot of people it was, and that's fair. That's fine. But I think that's what happened.
And they're wrong.
They're not. What? They're just probably in the minority.
Right.
Otherwise, if they were in the majority, that version would have continued and succeeded. And we would be talking about Superman 4.
Man of Steel 3.
Henry Cavill. Man of Steel 3. Man of Steel 4 would be coming out right now. But that didn't happen.
And I think that is the tricky part. At least that's how it was for me too, was the fact that I never felt like Man of Steel had the opportunity, or those filmmakers had the opportunity to fully like establish who that character was. Yeah. So you go from that to then a team up movie.
Yeah.
Where Batman
he's not even in it.
Batman kind of takes the spotlight away. And then the third iteration or the third film is a Justice League team up movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we don't really have an opportunity. Like if you want to start doing a deconstructed story of a character, fine. But at some point, whether it's the sequel or whatever, the thing for me on like a personal level and my personal connection to the character, if you want people to believe in him, you have to give them a reason to. Mm-hmm. And Man of Steel in some ways does, but a lot of ways doesn't, because it doesn't clearly define Superman. It kind of tiptoes in some areas. And a lot of people will always use the excuse of, well, it was supposed to happen in future films, but they never got to it. And it's like, well, yes and no, because even I've read some of the stuff that some of those filmmakers wanted to do in later stories or in the Justice League sequels. And I'm like, you are at step 50 and you've barely made it past step 1.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm not saying that the DC universe had to make origin stories first.
No.
I don't think you necessarily needed to, but I think audiences needed to understand why they need to care about this character. So when he dies, everyone universally gives a shit. And I think comic book fans gave a shit because they were already reading comics for years. And movie people have never been, modern especially, were never exposed to Superman other than what was on Smallville. But even on Smallville, he wasn't Superman. He never wore the suit. He never flew around Metropolis. He never saved people's lives. And like you were saying, Brandon Routh was carrying the weight of the previous era. So we never really got to see a modern Superman being Superman until hopefully now.
It was also tough because you brought up the character of Captain America, Steve Rogers.
Blaming me a lot for stuff. I feel attacked.
No, bro. I'm inspired.
Am I just that smart?
Yes. You are inadvertently, no, you're very purposely bringing up these connective threads. And everything you guys are saying, you brought this up last week where you were like, I got more into Captain America, or you came into that character and sort of, change your perspective of what that character is. Probably in big part due to those movies that were coming out. 1, 2, and 3, and the Avengers movies. And,
but it was also my conversations with you guys. And that has a lot to do with how people perceive the fandom as well. Like the people that they interact with. That's a whole different conversation for a whole different day.
That's true. But I want to bring up Cap because Captain America, it's tough to talk about just the previous iteration of Superman, Henry Cavill.
Right.
Because to some, they really loved that those movies pushed that character to the point where he had to snap a dude's neck. He did it to save lives. And I understand I understand like the reasoning, the logic behind trying to do that and really being like, we're going to give you something you've never seen. This isn't your grandfather's Superman. This is, this is new. This is whatever. But really at the end of the day, you're bringing that character down to our level, our being regular people. We suck. Of course I would kill somebody to save a family that's about to be lasered by sure. That's not a big moral, like, yes, I would do it too. Like a normal person would, but that's not Superman. He's not real. His stories exist to be these like allegories for the choices we have to think about every day and for what kind of people we want to be. And so bringing him down to our level, it is sort of like reducing the Superman of it a little bit. And I also think that it was frustrating to see those movies start to come out and to kind of learn the creative process and why all those creatives, the writers, producers, directors were doing what they were doing. And a big part of it was they were like, we just don't know if like classic Superman would work. But then you turn over here and it's like, but Steve Rogers' Captain America is working. He is such a dorky idea. The concept, he's named Captain America. And yet an entire generation of movie-going people fell in love with Steve because we started with Skinny Steve, right? We fell in love with him and his friendship, his brotherhood with Bucky, right? And it's like... And
Mark is cheering. He's jumping up and down in the booth.
No matter how cynical you are to the idea, hey, I'm going to take you to a movie this weekend. It's called Captain America. Oh, brother. This is going to barf. This is going to suck. By the end of it, you're like, he can't be with Peggy. He can't, he wakes up at 70 years later and now he's here. And then you see the Avengers.
I missed a date.
I had a date. My God. So
That's
those
tragic.
moments, then with the character who he is, then you put him in the cynical world.
The
Winter Soldier.
Well, let's segue before we go way over on time. Let's segue into that, right? So let's talk about Creature Commandos. Let's talk about Jaime Pistolas and see what he's going to do with this whole franchise, right?
Good save.
Because I feel like that cynical universe was set up in Creature Commandos. And I don't know if you guys agree fully.
Oh, I do.
But I feel like Creature Commandos gave us a hint of what is to come and the world that Superman is playing in. So we got to talk about the future now. Like we've been talking about the mythos. Let's talk about the future and what we're going to do with, obviously, everybody now who is listening knows that we love Superman and that he is important. Where does Jaime Pistolas take...
You're setting yourself up now at this point. You know what you're doing.
Where does Jaime take Superman? And do we feel like, just from the little we've seen, it is going in the right direction?
So far, yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
okay.
Yeah, I know. I totally agree.
Elaborate.
And I think a lot of it also, it's not even just based on Creature Commandos. A lot of it also came from what he did on Peacemaker, the Suicide Squad, because for me at least, the most important things that I got out of it was I understood who the characters were. And it's the one thing that, at the end of the day, it's all, the proof will be in the pudding, right? If I walk out of the Superman movie and I feel like I understand who the character is, even maybe more so than what I think I know now, and my family and our friends walk out of the movie, they're like, oh, that's who that character is?
Mhm.
Got it.
I had no idea.
Then the movie, I think, did its job.
Mm-hmm.
But because he already has such a good track record as of right now with these few projects he's already done, I am confident. And one of the things, and it's a silly thing maybe to some people, and some people probably don't like it, it's the use of the John Williams theme. Because I know for a lot of people, the John Williams theme belongs to Christopher Reeve. But for me, that is Superman's theme.
Right. Okay.
So I really feel like that Jaime Pistolas is trying to take the best elements of everything Superman, whether it's music, imagery, iconography from the comic books, certain little moments from the comics, the TV shows, all that stuff. And because I do think that he's as big, if not more of a fan than even we are. And he understands the importance of that character in that world. And in my mind, if Superman does not work, the rest of it can't work. He's one of the founding fathers of the DC universe. He's one of the three. He's one of the three pillars of the Justice League.
He has got to work.
Yeah,
he's the standard that then you can compare Batman to.
Yeah,
he's when you set up Superman, you go, okay, now here's what makes Batman unique. He's not like Superman in these ways, and that's what makes Wonder Woman unique, and that's what makes, frankly, Green Lantern and all the rest of them. So you're right, dude. That
the backbone.
That's the movie that I think does have the most pressure on it this year,
100%,
hands down. Period.
Yeah.
Period. I don't know what's going to happen if it doesn't. I know it's going to do well financially. I believe it will, but I don't know what's going to happen if people are like, on it. I don't know.
And there's always that chance, right? Like we always want to be optimistic, and we give movies the benefit of the doubt.
Always.
Like we're kind of gentler on critiquing movies. And
Listen,
stuff.
I went to the theater to watch Joker 1 and 2 and Madam Web,
and you saw all the Carnage movies.
Give it a shot.
Come on,
all the Carnage Venom movies.
Yeah.
So like, yes, we're generally a little bit softer on movies because we've been in the movie production biz. Like we have all worked on movies. We know what it takes to make a movie. And that's clear.
But this is a big deal.
This is a big deal, and I feel like this movie obviously needs to hit, but I'm hoping from what I've seen that Jaime Pistolas is in the right state of mind to write a movie like this.
Yeah.
And also like to set the backbone. I love his Guardians trilogy.
Yeah.
And I feel like he was setting things up that I didn't know that I was going to love by the third movie.
Yes.
So I'm hoping there's not too much of that like he's setting things up for the rest of the world that we're going to see pay off in 10 years rather than like setting up the proper Superman tone and the DC universe.
And then we'll go from there.
But that's a hard balance. That's a challenge that he's going to be doing while writing this movie because he's in charge of the whole DC universe.
Right.
And you do want audiences to get excited about what the next thing is going to be. You do want to, I'm sure he learned the right lessons from Marvel Studios because they were doing it right for 10 years. They were, they knew how to get audiences hyped for those incoming projects. I'm excited. I think Mr. Pistolas has the right frame of mind because we heard that he said no to this. That made me go, all right, Mr. Pistolas knows what Mr. Pistolas can do. He knows that he does Guardians of the Galaxy, he does Suicide Squad, he does Peacemaker. You know, if DC came to him and they said, do you want to do Doom Patrol? Fit perfectly with what James,
that's right up his alley,
Jaime Pistolas can do. But the fact that he went, no, I'm not the guy for Superman, and then came back around to it, because here's the thing. He was doing Suicide Squad, Peacemaker, Creature Commandos. I think that train was already set in motion. At some point during the productions of those, the writing and the shooting, Warner Brothers went, we're pivoting. Do you want the whole thing? And that made him go, whoa, hang on a minute. If I am doing the whole thing, what needs to happen? And he recognized some of the DC extended universe worked, some of it did not. What did not? The big show, the pillar, Superman. If we can get that to work.
Sadly, even Wonder Woman.
The first one was great. Hit the first
Second
one hit.
Tragic.
What happened? Well, 1984 did not quite. But that's also, there's lots of different reasons.
Yeah.
But I think Wonder Woman was also a thing of like, it was being built off of what came in Batman versus Superman, which that movie was like, Wonder Woman remained hidden for decades. And then they start developing Wonder Woman movies, and even Patty Jenkins was like, I don't know if that quite works. Like, we kind of need Wonder Woman to be Wonder Woman this whole time, which I agree with. But then that made it sort of a messy. So is she public in 1984?
Right.
Is she secretive? Is she
right.
Whatever. The point is, Mr. Pistolas saw it and went, okay, if this is the trajectory I'm already going in, this sort of cynical, irreverent, kind of like, I have some stuff to say about the world, but it's through the eyes of Peacemaker. I have some stuff but it's through the eyes of Creature Commandos. What does this all mean? This is pretty cynical. So then he goes, here comes the sincerity. And he's writing a character that is all heart, just wide-eyed hope, sincerity, hope. And I think that Mr. Pistolas can do it, but it's pressure across the board.
It's
on
it's gonna
him,
be a
on
hard
everybody
sell.
involved.
Yeah.
It's
a hard sell.
Yeah, and it's a thing of we know that the audiences have accepted similar-ish stories, mainly Captain America. We have another Captain America movie coming out this year, so that's not a franchise that has failed. It's like still a thing. People still are around for it, but yeah, Superman. The fact, a lot of baggage.
I have faith in him being able to do it because he changed my mind on Guardians. I was very lukewarm about the Guardians in general. 1, great. 2, fantastic. 3, with Rocket, the way he was able to make me cry. The second time I saw the movie, I saw Rocket on screen and immediately just started crying because I knew his arc. And I was like, oh my God, this is insane. I never thought I would care about this character as much as this character was well written, right? It was so good. And so the fact that he was able to take a cynical little raccoon and make me care about him so much, I'm like, I feel like he is going to have the foresight and the
Crypto.
Starting with crypto, but also like the wherewithal of understanding the climate that movies are in right now, because superhero movies are a dime a dozen at this point. What is he going to do to make us care about this? And how is he going to write this? Because everybody's writing superhero movies right now, and he's got to really stand out. And Creature Commando is really kind of like solidified for me that he understands the world, but in the live action sense, it could be a completely different beast. Right?
But to be clear, we all are very hopeful for it.
100%.
It's going to be be great.
I need it to be great.
We all do.
I need it to be great.
Not that I want it to. It must be.
I
must be
personally
sensational.
Need it to be great. And especially off the back of Superman and Lois, man.
Absolutely.
Like, just re-release that in theaters, bro. Like,
just the whole season.
Yeah, all 4 seasons.
Well, and I think also to your point, the thing that I always think about is we also live in an interesting time because of the way the pandemic has affected the theater experience. We theater very differently than we did 5 years ago. And even with Marvel being Marvel,
I don't even buy popcorn or
Jesus
or M&Ms anymore. I sneak them in.
I have not changed my routine.
So expensive.
Yeah, I haven't changed my routine because I'm too nostalgic, I guess. But I think also Marvel has changed, right? And the opinions about Marvel and the movies and the shows, and I know we'll probably talk about it on our next episode. We'll get into all of it. So I'm curious to see what Captain America does, if it kind of takes us back to what will feel like the Infinity Saga. Because I've been mixed on some of the projects in the last few years, but also I think that James Gunn has a really huge has a huge responsibility to also make it feel like it's worth seeing the film in the movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think some movies have slowly been able to do that. You've got your Dune Part 2s. I think Deadpool and Wolverine even did it for a lot of people because that was kind of the big show for Marvel last year. But people are generally not going to the theater as much as they were. So I really hope that if Superman really, no pun intended, takes off, pun intended, that it leads to everyone just flocking to the theater together to experience the rest of the DC universe that's on the big screen.
Basically, go give it a shot. Go give it a shot in theaters.
You got nothing to lose.
Yeah, nothing to lose. But let's move on to the viewer questions because we have some viewer questions, right?
In our Discord that you can access through Patreon, we have asked our community to provide us some questions. There's some really good ones in there, and I do want to get to those. We have a little bit of time.
Yeah. We still got some time left. So
let's get to
Did you have one that stood out, Adam?
Yeah, whatever you want, Adam.
First question from one of our mods, WDM 1262.
All right.
Question for the DCU. James Gunn has discussed how canon is sort of loose because he wants each movie, show, or game to be able to stand on its own without folks saying, I need to catch up to follow the stories. How do you all feel about that approach? And as broad question, what heroes and villains that we haven't seen in live action are you most excited for?
Those are two
besides Pooch as Booster Gold?
Of course.
Classic.
For our pal.
Yeah, those are two pretty big questions.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you guys want to tackle first?
Well, I think when it comes to to canon and what's kind of like required of the viewer, I think that, and we've said this about Marvel too, once the train gets moving, either get on or don't. And if you're making
get on wherever you want.
Exactly. Get on wherever you want.
Yeah.
And if at any point, there's a property or a show or a movie or whatever, and you're like, well, I haven't seen everything before it, that's kind of on you.
But at the same time, it's also on the marketing.
It is.
Because marketing needs to, this conversation is frustrating for me because we just put out like the viewer guide to Captain America Brave New World.
Right.
We did one for Daredevil, And people are going to inevitably go, as they did with this Captain America one, they're like, oh, see, this is the problem. I have to watch all this stuff to watch a new Captain America movie. You don't have to do anything.
You don't got to do
just go
shit.
to the theater
Just
on
go.
February 14th.
You ain't got to do shit.
You don't have to see a trailer. You sit there and you go, oh, Harrison Ford, oh, he's angry and red. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and there's little moments like in one of the most recent TV spots for Brave New World, Anthony Mackie was like facing off against a Red Hulk I saw, and then he goes, I should have taken that serum. That's all you. That summed up the TV show The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. He did not take the serum.
That's exactly.
You know, so like these projects, this is the joy of interconnectivity. If they're doing it right, they're gonna fill you in on whatever you need to know.
Mm-hmm.
Captain America: The Winter Soldier is a perfect example. Dude goes to the Smithsonian to learn about himself, and he teaches the audience what the first Captain America movie was, and then we're in the story.
Exactly.
So it's about that. It's about the marketing. If the marketing isn't going, you need to go see Thunderbolts because this looks like a good time, then they're failing. If the marketing makes you feel like you didn't see Ant-Man and the Wasp, you better watch that.
Better catch
you
up,
didn't
chump.
see Black Widow, the movie, or Hawkeye, the TV show?
Idiot.
You better.
Why are you so stupid?
So it's marketing.
Yep.
But I also don't want every single one of these big interconnected universe like franchises to have every single one of their projects disconnected.
Right.
And I don't think that's what James Pistolas is going to do either.
No,
I know he's smart. He's just aware of like what that verbiage means for people when they read it, when they see it. It pisses them off. So he's just going to sneak in a Swamp Thing at the end of Superman. Do you know what I mean? He's going to sneak it in so that when people go see Swamp Thing, there's like you need to let the audience go, oh, did you
catch that?
He was in Superman.
And then
what?
And then
Really?
what's cool is to be
That's
like,
it.
just wait for the next one. Just
But
wait.
like the trailer for, you know, the James Mangold Swamp Thing movie should not be like, if you saw Superman, then you'd like, it should not about that.
In a world.
Because that's kind of not how most of these comic books even operate at that moment.
Right.
Yeah,
So that's my take on it, is that I just do think it comes down to the marketing.
Yeah, I agree. I also feel like marketing, yes, is one big point, but I also feel like there are people who won't watch it just because it's too big.
That's
like
fine.
even if they don't
It's
know
fine.
about the marketing, they're just like, it's just
Fine.
too big. Like I don't feel like I
Yeah.
want to jump in it. And you're right. That is 100%
It's
fine.
fine.
But I feel like the burden should also be on the movie to give you an easy entry point. Every movie should be an easy entry point
I
into
agree.
the franchise.
I agree.
Movie and show.
And show, right. It should have its easy on and easy off.
Mhm.
Even if you don't want to continue, even if it's not your bag. Like you should feel like I watched a satisfying movie.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's what it should be.
You should be able to put on any one of these movies and blindfold a person for the first few moments where you see the Marvel Studios logo.
Mhm.
And then once the movie starts, take off the blindfold, and then they're just watching a Paul Rudd
They're just
comedy.
watching a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He gets a motorcycle suit, he shrinks. This is crazy. And then
Crazy.
halfway
Yeah.
through, you go, The Avengers?
Yeah.
I didn't know this was in the
What did he
same.
say?
That's all it's supposed to be.
Yeah,
What it is?
But at the same time, they want to slap the logos all over the shit.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
want
yeah.
every
Yeah.
DC movie is going to be a DC movie,
DC
DC Studios,
Studios,
DC
yeah.
this, DC that. It's
I
marketing
think the
stuff,
only
dude.
thing where it can become tricky, and maybe I'm completely wrong about this, and I don't think we fully experienced this in the MCU just yet because the shows started after the Infinity Saga.
Mhm.
Something like Lanterns. We're going to introduce
Mhm.
Jon Stewart. We're going to introduce Hal Jordan.
Yes.
And then I'm assuming that Jon Stewart will go into a film. How much context will the movie give us about who Hal Jordan is as a character if you don't watch Lanterns? Whereas, like with Marvel, we had a WandaVision show, but we'd already been with Wanda for years.
Right.
And then she was in Doctor Strange. So
I
we
guess-
didn't miss context.
But the trick there is like they did the Ms. Marvel show,
Mhm.
and then she showed up in a movie.
Mhm.
So like, are there people that went and saw that movie, had a good time, and
Who the hell's this?
didn't feel like they were lost, or did they feel like
Oh,
they were
yeah.
lost? So
Mhm.
that's the tricky thing,
don't
because
know.
like I would consider that TV show essential because I really
Yeah.
like that character. I was already in with the character,
Great show.
you know. But I don't want to tell a person like, hey, if you're looking for just like a good fun movie,
Mhm.
go watch. It's just so weird, dude, too, because it's just sort of like. It's like when people complain about Star Wars being Star Wars. I'm like, what did you want? Do you want this to be The Godfather? It's a
Right.
Star Wars movie.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry. You know, people that are like, I don't want to have to watch all this stuff.
The
Listen,
Space Wizard movie.
some of this stuff then isn't made for you. If you were mad that Andrew Garfield popped up in Spider-Man No Way Home and then Tobey Maguire popped up because you're like, I haven't seen these Andrew Garfield movies yet. I don't know what's going on. Then it's not for you, dude. That movie's for me. I don't know what to tell you, right? That's
Yeah,
paying
yeah.
off my investment.
But he
Yeah.
still did a great job in the movie.
Yes.
And,
And the movie,
it's great.
gave
Yes.
you all the context you needed.
He
Right.
tells you, I lost my MJ. And then when he saves Zendaya, you go,
Hello?
oh, that's what the moment
But
is.
for me, I cried during
because
that
we
moment.
know the Emma Stone part of it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah. And okay, the other part of, I think it was Wes's question, what character do we want to see? Martian Manhunter. I want the soul of Martian Manhunter on screen in a movie. I think that is a heartbreakingly beautiful character.
Even over Plastic Man?
Yeah. Yeah, but Plastic Man, I love a Plastic Man.
I know.
Yeah.
Because we have one more question.
I mean, I would say Martian Manhunter also, because I think a lot of people not confused, but they're always like, isn't he just like Superman, but he's just scared of fire?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just such a surface level thing to say about that character.
He also loves Oreo cookies, okay? That's the main thing. It's his favorite thing.
Yeah.
It's such a great character.
Yeah. And we're getting Green Lanterns multiples, so I'm excited about that,
Sinestro is going to be in that.
Sinestro's going to be in it. God damn, I can't wait.
Basically, any character that I'm sure we could think of that's like, they should do that, I'm positive they've already
probably
thought of it.
But you know James Gunn loves his deep cuts. So
True.
He's going to bring in some off-the-wall characters. For me, it's probably Bawana Beast or Batmite.
Oh yes,
no. It's definitely
those are good picks. What are you talking about?
I want the Green Lanterns to be done justice.
Yeah.
I've had a pitch in my head. You guys have heard this 1,000 times, but I want the Green Lantern series to be like a Lord of the Rings type, like super epic, just like
interesting,
crazy, just super lore heavy. That's just me though, because it's not going to be an easy entry point for people.
At the dawn of time, aeons ago.
Yeah,
the Guardians of the Universe forged the rings.
I love the Blue Lantern. What's his name? Saint Walker. Saint Walker. Yeah, Saint Walker. I love the dynamic between all the rings, and I feel like it's just so inspirational to watch the Green Lantern. And it's just because it's all will based, and so I need my Green Lanterns to be done right. But also Bawana Beast and Batmite.
Yeah. The way that we felt when we saw like the Avengers first assemble, or when we saw like the Guardians of the Galaxy meet like Spider-Man and Iron Man and shit, that's a feeling you get when like there's something going down up in space, and then all of a sudden like all of the different lantern corps arrive, like all the different colors,
exactly,
like the War of Light, Blackest Night,
Blackest Night.
Imagine off this day.
Imagine if they did Blackest Night.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
They're working towards that.
Jaime Pistolas,
that's what I want them to work up to. Like just that Green Lantern.
But
Blackest Night.
The key thing is working up to it. You can't just
you don't
right
just
out the gate
jump
be like,
into
we're doing this.
All right,
Eugene Tan's asking, ever since James Gunn announced the DCU Batman movie, The Brave and the Bold, is it very likely that the DCU version of Batman and Bruce Wayne will either be 37 or 38 once he's going to make his entrance in the DC cinematic universe?
This is such a specific question.
I know. 37 or 38. Huge
either
difference.
of us could play him. It's great.
This is Eugene's question. Eugene, maybe it could be, but a Batman could also be 45.
I would say 36. I would say and a half.
It depends. Do they want to? It just depends. If they want a Batman that is maybe closer in age to the Superman, probably gonna be mid 30s.
Yeah.
Which really means an actor is gonna look early 30s.
Right.
Which means it's gonna be weird that he's
Robert
gonna have
Pattinson basically in the Batman.
Yeah.
Because he was 30 something.
But I know they're gonna get a guy. I think Robert Pattinson's a phenomenal actor. He does have a baby face. Yep. He looks like a teen boy at all times. Even in Mickey 17.
He's a vampire, don't you know?
I'm like, he's a teenager.
You know he's a
boy.
real vampire?
Yeah. So you know that thing where like John Hamm probably looked like he was in his mid 40s since he was 22. Because he grew a beard. He looks like an Alex Ross painting. He's just sort of like big chin, like, he looks like Archer from the TV show Archer. Like they're going to get a guy like that. Not to say that Robert Pattinson's Batman doesn't bring a really cool energy to that thing, but he's this like skinny Nirvana emo thing, and that's going to be different than like 26 and
big square chested.
Yeah, the way
I am vengeance. I am the night.
Although that's kind of what we saw in Creature Commandos. Yeah. You guys remember that?
Big boy.
Yeah, but I mean, James Gunn has even talked about how like a lot of that stuff will change, change, So it's nothing's finite.
That's all we needed to know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole thing about the ages is interesting because I think it also came up when talking about Hal Jordan compared to Jon Stewart in the show Lanterns.
Yes.
Kyle Chandler is like in his 60s.
Yeah.
I think people sometimes also get a little too hung up on the ages because at the end of the day, he could be 35 and celebrating his 30th birthday in the context of the film, and who cares?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. These characters will be 37 for the next 10
Eugene,
years.
you heard that? It doesn't matter.
But to Eugene's point, I think Eugene's asking, like, does this mean, like, what does it mean? What are the ramifications of a character being a certain age? And it kind of like how, like, Ben Affleck was seemingly older than the Henry Cavill versions of those characters. Oh, I meant Batman was active in Gotham City for 10 years before Superman shows up. 20 years, since the 90s. That's a very different dynamic than just like, so it's all about what they want to do with that world building.
Yeah.
Look, this kind of messed me up, and I first got used to this idea when they were like, Michael Douglas is going to be Hank Pym. I went, yo, what? No, Hank Pym is Ant-Man, and Ant-Man's one of the first Avengers. At least that's how it is in the comics. And they're all close to around the same age. Bruce Banner, Tony Stark, Hank Pym, Reed Richards. All the big brains of the Marvel Universe. I'm like, they got to be around the same age. But they've kind of spreading everything out. And the trade-off is, look, we might lose a young Hank Pym, a young Ant-Man for certain stories, but we're still going to give you another Ant-Man and Wasp with Hope Van Dyne, and we're going to give you Paul Rudd instead. Wouldn't you want that? I said, yes, I would. Yes, I would. So if we're getting a Batman that's a little bit older, and maybe it might not look the way you think it should look when he stands next to and meets Superman, well, what do we gain? Well, he has a 15-year-old kid. Yeah. That's Damian Wayne. Oh, this is cool. We've never seen this story in a live-action movie before. That's interesting. What do we lose? What do we gain? So if you just want all this, and then in the DC universe, every superhero debuted and they were all 29 years old. Like
at the same time.
It's weird. Like Hal Jordan, Barry Allen, Diana Prince, Clark Kent, and Bruce Wayne, and Arthur Curry are 29, and they all form the Justice League. You're like, that's weird. So you got to have the variation, and then we'll go from there. There's going to be younger heroes, older heroes. I like it too. I think it's smart to have Hal be the veteran, because then you can have your established, like, he was first, he was the first Green Lantern, whatever. And then John comes in. Yeah. John is probably going to end up being the one in a Justice League movie.
Of course. Well, and I think it just further maybe proves, this is just my theory, that cynical world, with established heroes, and then the beacon of light comes through, the hope comes in.
Bingo.
Completely refocuses where everything goes.
And maybe Kyle Chandler's Hal Jordan was doing things one way.
Right.
Yep.
But then with Superman, then John Stewart gets the ring. He's like, I'm going to do it like this. And Hal's like, okay.
But also with room for Superman to grow in his own way, right? Yep. I hope he runs into Wildcat. He learns some, or is that his name? The boxing?
Yeah, dude.
Guy? Yeah.
Good pull.
I hope he runs into Wildcat and learns some lessons from that old timer too.
Grant, I agree.
That dude is fucking fantastic.
I want the Justice Society to be a thing.
Right? Like there's still got to be a lot of room for these characters to grow.
Yeah.
I need to see that kind of stuff because it makes sense that a guy like Wildcat could exist in the world pre-Superman and he doesn't necessarily have superpowers. He's just a real tough dude.
I would love it if this DC universe, and we had some really fun establishing stuff in the Creature Commando show, but I would love it if in the future of this brand that they were like, the Justice Society, they were active in World War II. And maybe we do a movie where you cast young actors and it's just set in World War II, right? That's it. Then like all these years later, all these decades later, you have a new character named Barry Allen, the Flash, who's like, I grew up listening to stories about Jay Garrick, the Flash. I'm going to be the Flash because I have powers. I'm running fast. I'm the Flash. No question. And then you do a time travel Shanann story where these characters get to go and interact with the Justice Society, but they're still in World War II.
Yeah.
An animated movie kind of did a version of this a couple years ago in the Tomorrowverse, and some of that was really fun. But I would love for them to know of one another.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah, and it just adds to the world.
Anyway,
I think Adam has one really good... Yeah, we got to wrap up here pretty soon, but we got one more comment, right? It's a beautiful comment.
It's a great comment.
Yeah.
This is from our YouTube comments. I'm going to read this. It's a little lengthy, but I think it's worth reading out loud.
A little girthy.
It's from
a little girthy.
J. Juck Yumis. I probably butchered that. I'm sorry. Regarding getting into Superman, I turned 30 this year and had never connected with any Superman content and had in fact never read or purchased comics until the modern Son of Kal-El, John Kent run where he comes out.
Yeah.
As a bisexual dude myself, it really surprised me to see DC commit to that story for him, given my preconceived ideas of what the Superman superfamily fandom was like. Sort of toxic and overly dude-bro-y.
Yeah.
That run got me interested in watching the great Superman and Lois show on CW getting to see his character have tender moments with his family or times of fear and anxiety, even as a god among men, really opened the door for me to understand in a different way what kind of stories are possible with the Superman character. Needless to say, I'm now very excited for the movie this summer, which is crazy to me because I wouldn't have cared at all almost exactly 4 years prior to the release date.
Boom.
Love your guys' content and have for many years now. Congrats on the constant reforging.
He gets it. He gets it. And that's
amazing.
We're done, but we got presents today, baby. Augustine, that's for you, baby.
Oh, wow.
Oh my God. What the hell?
This is for you, my friend.
What? Oh, nice. This is Batman Deceased.
Everything just tingled in my body.
Yes, that's a Batman Deceased, like Batman zombie statue. And this is the Superman with the new logo. This
what
is
about you? You didn't get nothing?
Yeah, I got to eat a bunch of chocolates, bro. This is that's from we have a promotional. At this point, you probably have seen it. The Kinder Joy sent us a DC Funko toy collection, special edition tin thing.
Very
But
cool.
that didn't come in that. I got that from a friend, and that's for you.
Are we gonna get gifts to every episode?
Hey,
This is now 2 in a row, baby.
I brought for the first 2. Y'all better step it up next week. Bring me some Marvel shit.
I'm
I'm
got
gonna bring
you,
you some
baby. I
Jack
got
in the
you.
Box.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. I
You know what?
love
I'll
that.
bring California burrito.
If you bring me
there
some
you
stuffed
go.
jalapenos, we're even Stevens. That's
Brother,
good. That's
we're gonna
good.
have a whole junk
Got you,
food
baby.
episode
Okay,
of
okay.
Heroes
Oh, man.
Reforged.
All right, so then one more call to action. We're done here,
Yeah.
but next week is going to be our Marvel themed. No, it's not.
No, we're
We're
gonna
pausing.
wait. Yeah.
We're going to give you guys the opportunity to watch Captain America: Brave New World. Then we're going to do a Marvel episode.
Yeah.
Yes.
We don't know what next week's is going to be. Stay
Honestly,
tuned.
any questions?
Stay tuned, and we are still going to have that space in our Discord to be
Yes,
dropping
yes.
those questions in
Mhm.
because these fan questions are great, and we had even more we couldn't get to. So thank you guys so much for the warm reception.
Episode
This is
1 in the bag, baby.
Done.
Yeah,
Boom.
absolutely.
In the bag.
Wrap us up.
And also, I think like I'm super excited for us to get more into DC because I feel like DC was a really touchy thing that we never wanted to dive into because we didn't necessarily love all the projects that were coming out of it, and we didn't want to deal with sort of all the pushback all the time.
We got nothing to lose now, man.
Yeah, so I'm honestly just really excited to talk about more DC stuff and particularly Superman this summer. So I can't wait to do that podcast episode. But of course, guys, if you're listening or watching, like, share, do all that great social media stuff. Join the Discord, join the Patreon, check out everything else that we're watching. See you guys next week. Bye.
Heroes Reforged is gonna react. Heroes Reforged is gonna review. Heroes Reforged is gonna discuss. That's why we are watching.